I had a friend that also drove. He drove one of the Gravedigger trucks. Boo, Gravedigger. By the way, all my kids know to cheer for Mohawk Warrior, not Gravedigger. Anyway.
Hey, I remember Gravedigger when I was watching Monster Jam. Big fan.
Do you? Okay. But did you cheer for him, Drew? That's the question.
Gravedigger was cool.
Look, we can end this podcast right now. You know.
What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. of Dad Central and the Dad Central Show, and
with Drew Solon of Dad Central and the Dad Central Show. How are you today, Ed?
Well, you know what? I got up this morning, went outside, and saw frost on my car and frost on the roof. So I say frost before daylight savings time comes in. I just going, oh my gosh. And the leaves are still on the ground. I got to rake leaves, you know, all those wonderful things we have to do in this part of the world. How about you?
Well, last night it became a winter wonderland. So I woke up and there was snow covering everything. So, that's the beauty of living where we live. And I'm trying to say beauty so that I can keep a positive mindset, because I said to Kristen this morning, I'm not a fan of winter. Can you imagine? We have 5 more months of this. I digress.
Well, hold on. It's not as long as it used to be. There's something called global warming and climate change. Because for me now, it's not as long as it used to be.
Okay, we'll go with that. I'll keep a
okay, quick pop quiz. If you had a chance to live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Hawaii.
All right, there you go. Well, maybe one day Drew will be doing the Dad Central Show from Hawaii. He'll be on the beach doing it from Hawaii. So speaking about that, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. And we also like to thank the continuous support of Dove Men Plus Care to continue supporting us in these epic conversations that help fathers and their families worldwide. So, man, I'm thinking about Hawaii now. Am I going to get through this show? Jeez.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll be back. So we have another new friend today, and I am jacked about this young gentleman because he's got a lot of great energy and he has quite the story. So, Drew, I'll hand you over to the intro.
Okay. Well, we are honored to have Bryce Kenny. He's a professional Monster Jam driver. He's also a newly published author and, of course, a dad to 3 kids. So, Bryce, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you here. Can't wait to hear what you got to share.
I appreciate that, guys. It's good to have the opportunity to chat a little bit. And also, I think you just brought the temperature down here in my studio by a good 25 degrees by all of your complaining. And so I won't complain that I was freezing, because I'm here in North Carolina, and we just had like the coldest day of the year yesterday, and today it's 49 degrees and I'm freezing my buns off down here. So it's okay. All right, I won't complain anymore. You got snow last night. It could be worse.
Yeah, it was a winter wonderland, but that's okay. Well, we're going to heat it up, the conversation. So
there we go.
It'll all be good.
Well, let's get it out of the way. What is Monster Jam driving? I was going to say, let's get that out of the way first.
Oh man, can you believe that I get to say that my job, my career, is driving a 12,000-pound truck for a living and doing backflips and jumping at 45 feet in the air and hopefully landing softly. I mean, everybody should write a very strongly worded email or letter to your high school guidance counselor who did not tell you that this was a career option to be a professional Monster Jam driver. But it's really cool. I get to be the full-time driver of the Great Clips Mohawk Warrior Monster Jam truck, travel all around North America, and actually coming up to Toronto next year. It's one of my first chances to get back up to Canada in probably the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm really excited about that. But I'm a professional crash test dummy for a living, apparently.
So what, you just didn't say one day you wanted to be a Monster Jam driver. Like, how did that happen? There's got to be something before that to get to this.
Yeah. So I grew up in professional drag racing, and my family owned a drag strip up in Kentucky. And so every single time I would get out of school for the summer break, I would drive up to Kentucky, work at the track all week long, weed eating the fence lines. And then when I was 8, that's when you could legally start driving a junior dragster. And so on the weekends, I'd spend my time getting to race our family junior dragster, going 45 miles an hour. I thought I was going 100 miles an hour at 8 years old doing that. But it was just a blast to come up through that. And then our family actually went professional in the professional ranks in top fuel drag racing. So those are the long, skinny cars that go 300 miles an hour in 4 seconds. And that was my dream, to be a professional top fuel driver. It wasn't even Monster Jam. I had never even been to a Monster Jam event until I first started talking to Monster Jam. And so when I got a chance to chase that dream in top fuel drag racing, and I'll always tell the story, I failed at it. You know, I got to run for about 3 years trying to find sponsorships. And that was during the last big recession through 2011. And I just couldn't do it. You know, I kept getting my teeth kicked in corporate boardrooms and people that just wouldn't take a chance on this kid. And I got out of that, went into corporate America. And that's actually about 4 years into that career is when Monster Jam called me because of my background in drag racing. And so they said, hey, you know, would you want to come up and test in a Monster Jam truck? And I thought, my first honest reaction was, how much is that going to cost me? Because my top fuel stuff, I had 7 different jobs at one time going into that dream in top fuel, trying to make that work. So that was my first reaction. They kind of said, well, you know, I mean, we've got the trucks and everything. I mean, what, you know, it's our equipment. In my mind, I thought, so just a flight and a hotel? I'm like getting excited going, man, if it's only like $1,000 to do this, what a story. And they kind of got frustrated and they're like, no, we will buy you a flight and we have a hotel room booked for you. Can you just get off work for a couple of days to come up to Paxton, Illinois and test in a Monster Jam truck? And I thought, of course I could do that. Like, who would say no to getting to go up there on Monster Jam's dime and get a chance to drive one of these trucks and test it out? I did not have any expectation it would go past that. I just didn't. I knew I'd have fun, but honestly, I thought I'd be in a restaurant 10 years from then and get to kind of nudge a buddy and as it came up on TV and say, man, 10 years ago, you know, I drove one of those a long time ago for a test thing at Monster Jam University, real place. They even gave me a diploma by the end of it, which I thought was kind of hilarious. But I also left it in the hotel room and didn't bring it home with me because I couldn't fit it in my carry-on. And now I talk about it all the time. I wish I would have kept the diploma. But yes, I am officially a Monster Jam University grad. That was 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago now. And here I am. I've been full-time for the last 7 years, left my corporate job for it as well. And man, I'm just having the time of my life out there and doing the Monster Jam tours and getting to travel all around North America and breaking trucks in half, flying home, and they fix it all week. I get to go fly back out the next weekend and do it again. It's awesome.
Drew, I think we better get into some fatherhood stuff because we could chat about this all day. So, Drew, I'm going to put it over to you, my brother.
Really? That's your segue to switch. Well, I mean, I'm curious to know more about this story, right? I imagine anyone who's listening is curious to know more too. So, I mean, how about we'll see how we can transition after this. Like Bryce, this idea of taking that risk is what really stands out to me. But it really seems like all the risk was taken away. But I mean, you'd never driven a Monster Jam truck before. You know, were you thinking, like, talk to me about like just the willing to take that shot?
Well, and we had just started our family that year. So in fact, the first time I was supposed to go up to Monster Jam University, I had to cancel the very first trip because my daughter was born. And so, again, I thought it would be kind of a fun experience. My wife, she was somebody that was so right there at that time. She was so supportive. She still is incredibly supportive. And she was the one that was like, babe, we got it. You know, look, go up there to Monster Jam University and test it out. So we rescheduled for probably a month or two after Eliza was born. And I really remember thinking in that moment, I don't know how I would make this work, but the experience, like if you don't go, you'll never know. So let's go up there and try this stuff out. And like I said, the expectation was very low. It would turn into anything. And so it was a great experience to go off on that. Well, a year later is when I had my first season in Monster Jam. So my daughter wasn't even a year old yet by the time I had that. And Monster Jam was still a hobby at that point. So I had my job in corporate America. I was placing CFOs and CEOs into private equity backed companies. And I loved it. So it's like, I know it's so bizarre. You go from professional drag racing to talking to CEOs all day, and then into Monster Jam. But the actual progression of that makes a ton of sense the more someone gets to know me, because I spend a lot of my time now in corporate boardrooms and working with a lot of our sponsors. And I've got the business acumen to be able to understand what an organization the size of Great Clips, which is a $1.7 billion organization, understanding what they need and dealing with their franchisees. There's 1,000 franchisees in the system. So that part's a lot of fun. But being a new dad, one of the things that after that first year of dealing with Monster Jam was just a hobby. I think I did 12 weekends that year, came up to Canada a handful of times, I think 2 or 3 times that year. And it was really hard to make both work. And so Monster Jam, when they called me later that year, they said, "Hey, we've got a sponsor coming on board." Didn't know what the company was, but they said, "What would you be interested in, coming on board and doing this full time?" And I told them absolutely not. I knew I couldn't do both at the same time. I knew I couldn't do Monster Jam and be a brand ambassador for an organization, because I knew what I was, what the commitment was back in drag racing, and I failed at that, and that was all I was trying to do. So to be good at two things is you can't chase 2 rabbits at the same time. If you ever heard that saying, if you chase 2 rabbits at the same time, you won't catch either one. And so when Monster Jam first offered me that sponsored ride, I said no. And I knew I wouldn't. I barely had any time for my family then. So what would happen, if I tried to chase 2 rabbits, I'd lose my family if I tried to do that. So anyway, they fast forward a little bit, and finally we worked it out. But I went to my wife. I said, "Look, if we're going to do this and we're going to walk away from this corporate job, that was going to be my way to get back into professional drag racing, by the way." In my mind, I was like, if I go and create wealth, then I can be a team owner and get back into my dream of drag racing. Monster Jam was something that was so different and apart from what my original dream growing up was going to be. And so, but fast forward a year through all of that stuff. And finally I looked at Mackenzie, my wife, and I said, "Look, this is going to take a 30% pay cut from this corporate job to go do Monster Jam." Now that anyone that's married understands the weight and gravity of that discussion and pitching your wife on an idea like that. But guys, she was the one that came back to me and said, "Bryce, you were called to this. Like, you were built for motorsports." And she gave me the green light from her end. And I still had trouble deciding, but I was in my shop one day and I was on the phone with somebody and I was trying to decide what I was going to do, whether I was going to give up the corporate stuff to go into Monster Jam. And I was looking around at all the stuff in my shop and all the memorabilia I had, the pictures that meant so much to me. And every single one of them was a picture with me and my grandfather, or some special memory at the racetrack, or a banner, our first Top Fuel banner. It's still, all that stuff's still up on the walls in my shop. And you know what wasn't on the walls? Some CEO I had placed, some CFO I had placed. And so I knew right then and there what I remembered who I wanted to become, not just my why. Like, all of us talk a lot about, finding your why. Why do you do this? Why do you want to be a great dad? The why is great, but we don't do a good enough job as men at understanding who we want to become in the process. And that's why we're so frustrated at the what. So all of a sudden I remembered who I wanted to be, which was someone who used the platform of motorsports to impact the world. So that's why the what of Monster Jam fell in line so nicely with with who I wanted to ultimately become, being someone that used the platform of motorsports. So that's why I got off that phone call I was on when I was standing in my shop, and I realized that, I was built. It was a reminder. I was built to be someone who used the platform of motorsports to impact the world. And that's when I called Monster Jam right away. I said, "I'm in." And so that was the hard part, is you leave that safety net behind. And here I was, a new dad. Didn't have a clue what I was doing as a father. I knew who I wanted to be as a dad, but I was a long way of figuring out, how to make that all work. And we lost that safety net. But man, that was 7 years ago. And now I cannot imagine not getting to impact the world through the platform of motorsports like I've done the last 7 years. And it's only getting bigger. It's only getting better. And now my 8-year-old, who started me out as a dad here, she's the most supportive person in my household of what I'm doing. And even though she misses me when I travel, but she's not seen me in the corporate job of putting 80 hours a weekend to that either. But it is a family endeavor. It's not just dad going out doing that. My families are involved. My family, my 3 kids and my wife, they're all right there with me in this challenge and in this initiative of being someone who uses the platform of motorsports to impact the world.
Good stuff.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of great stuff. 2 things that stood out to me, and one that I wanted to talk about. One was you referenced your grandfather. You referenced those memories and how much meaning they had for you.
Yeah.
So maybe you can tell us just a little bit more about your grandfather, his influence, and how that's translated into, you making that critical decision.
Oh, my grandfather was my guy. He passed back in 2016. So he never got to watch me in Monster Jam, but he was somebody that, he helped me nickname my first Monster Jam truck, which we called it Nitro. So it was just a lot of fun to call him and get his thoughts on everything. And that was the first year, or he passed that same year that I started with Monster Jam. But he was my guy because I would grow up in all those summers that we would go to these national events and travel all around the country. And I got to watch him chase his dream, but I also got to hear him struggle. And I have realized that watching him struggle and making it through the hard stuff is what empowers me today to believe I can make it through the hard stuff too. And so I was very fortunate to be able to have a grandfather figure and a mentor in my life that it wasn't just the long conversations we had in the race rig going down the road, but it was the real life situations I watched him battle through and get through and become victorious through. And so that has empowered me more than anything. One of the reasons I wrote my book, Geared for Life, is because I really believe that my foundational beliefs, which are my gears, that's what the book is all about. And we'll get into that later. But a lot of the gears that I shift into every single day to find that right gear for the right life situation, a lot of that came from life situations that I got to watch my grandfather go through and conversations I had with him in that race rig. And so I'm very grateful for that. I hope the book is that same grandfatherly figure to the reader that my real grandfather was to me. Because like I said, not everyone has had a chance to have that impact on their life like I have. And so I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, he was that guy that, man, around every turn, he had a little nugget of wisdom, something that I told him for the last 5 years of his life. I was like, man, you've got to write a book or this stuff's all going to die with you. Like, we need this, and I would record him on video or on audio messages and stuff like that, just because I knew, man, these life lessons are going to be so precious. And unfortunately he did, he ended up passing and never actually wrote a book, but thankfully I've got enough of those life lessons and real lessons that I get to kind of hone in on those myself and use those every single day of my life.
Bryce, I want to jump in really quick here, and I don't know if you're up for it, but I think you are. I have, my intuition is saying you're up for it. If Gramps was sitting beside you right now, what would you tell him?
I look over at him, and if he was still sitting here with us today, I would probably, the first thing I would do is laugh. And I would say, can you believe that I get to do all of this? And I know that he would be laughing right with me, just saying and looking and saying, because his dream was always to use that platform for motorsports as well, to impact the world. And so I know he saw the potential to use motorsports the way I get to today. And here I get to kind of stand on his shoulders and the shoulders of a giant who, he started out just souping up Oldsmobiles on old abandoned airstrips back in the 1960s, and so here I am 63 years later, getting to really use those experiences that he had and that he kind of put into me to go out there and really make a difference. So that would be my first thing, would be a question is, can you believe I get to do this? And I know that he would just laugh back at me. And he always had that nugget of wisdom too. And I know that he would look back at me and say, I do believe that you get to do this. Mm-hmm. Right. Because he always spoke such good things into me. He was the one that jammed his finger into my chest in the Top Fuel car after I got my license. And he knew that was my dream. And it was one of his dreams to see me get my Top Fuel license. But I'll never forget getting the car back to our pit area and my grandfather leaning down into the cockpit, jamming his finger into my chest and saying, buddy, I am so proud of you. And that was after I just went 300 miles an hour. Right. And so it wasn't just, oh, he's proud of me because I worked hard or got a good grade on a test. It's like, I'm proud of you for driving this violent machine and not dying. So I do miss him so much. I lean on his wisdom. And a lot of times I kind of sit in his almost like quiet wisdom that I can imagine he is sitting here right beside me going, hey, buddy, don't forget about this. Hey, buddy, shift into this next gear. Hey, buddy, that's not the father you want to be. Go make a different decision. That's not the husband you talked about always committing to. Go make a different decision. Go say you're sorry. I can hear that quiet counsel still.
Drew, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, such powerful influence, right? Your grandfather had on you. And I'm curious to know about how about the relationship with your dad then?
Yeah.
And how that fits in there too.
Yeah, it's funny. My dad is he's such a caregiving individual. So it's my grandfather I'm also close with is my mom's dad.
Okay.
And so my mom is like the wild cheerleader, like, yeah, go. She sees a video of me crashing my Mohawk Warrior truck and is like, oh my gosh, Bryce, that was amazing. My dad's a chiropractor, which is very convenient, by the way, for my career choice. He puts Humpty Dumpty back together again after each weekend. But he is somebody that's like, oh son, he'll text me or call me. Oh son, I saw that crash from this weekend. Are you okay? Do you need an adjustment? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I do need to come in and see you on Monday morning, Father. But he was not the risk taker. So my relationship with my dad, and he'll tell you, he was an amazing. He wouldn't tell you this, but I will. He was an amazing provider. Worked long hours. Probably the only reason I didn't become a chiropractor is because I watched him put 12-hour days in every single day. And I was like, man, I don't think I can do that. But he was such an amazing provider, but he wasn't really home very often. The thing that I always credited my dad with is I don't remember him missing soccer games on the weekend. I don't remember him missing events. During the week, he was very rarely there. My own daughter last night, we went trick or treating, and my daughter said, "Why didn't Grandpa come?" Because Grandma Gigi came, and why didn't Grandpa come? And I just kind of looked at her and I was like, honestly, honey, that's just Grandpa. If it's during the week, Grandpa was always at the office, and he still is. And I credit him with that hard work that he does. And I want to be as hard of a worker as he is. But he's just in that generation where that's what you do during the week. But what I always credited my dad was not just as a provider, but he always told me after a soccer game or after something I was doing, or he always looked at me and said, buddy, I'm so proud of you. And the lesson that I've taken from my dad with my own kids is I shower them with that phrase. Buddy, I am so proud. Keegan, I am so proud of you. But I've learned one thing, and this has become a dad hack for me, is I stole this from somebody, I don't remember who it was, but it's proven true. I'll look at Keegan and I'll say, buddy, I'm so proud of you today for your work out there and what you did on the field. And, you high-fived everybody. You did this, you did that. But I'll ask him another question. I'll say, but let me ask you, are you proud of yourself? And I've almost gotten Keegan now where he's like, so first of all, he hears that affirmation from his dad, that his dad's proud of him. And then, so he's learning to be proud of himself and say, yeah, Dad, I'm proud of myself. And so, and the lesson I learned from whoever I stole that from was they said, look, you're not always going to be there to shower him with that affirmation. Right. Or you're not always going to be able to tell them you're proud of them when they're off at college and they make an A on that test. They might call you and stuff, but at some point they're going to live their own lives. And if they don't know how to have that self-pride and be proud of their effort and understand what it takes to become proud of themselves and the level of work that they need to go and do, then you're missing that opportunity. And so I always credit my dad because he always told me he was proud of me. And I've taken that lesson and then added to it to hopefully, make sure that my son and my daughters know, hey, I'm proud of you, and teaching them when and how to be proud of themselves. That's something that'll never come back void. And so my relationship with my dad, even today, we spend a lot of time on the golf course together. He's a very humble man. He's an incredible provider. And he's somebody that he's more quiet in his wisdom, and he's very slow to give his opinion on life stuff and life situations. And too often he's probably been the contrarian. So, when I bought the 1970 Mustang Mach 1 as my first car back in high school, and that was, a 35-year-old vehicle. And he's just the one that's like, Bryce, all you're going to do is be working on it all the time. I'm like, but Dad, I get to do burnouts in the school parking lot. Like, so we were always contrarians. And even to this day, we're probably contrarians. A lot of times we're so different, but we're still, even though we look a lot different, it's like a quarter, it's like you might be on different sides of the coin, but you're still valuable. And you have to have both sides of the quarter and the coin for that value to actually exist, and for you to be able to put the quarter in the gumball machine and get the gumball. And that's how I would describe my relationship with my dad.
I want to jump in really quick here. I know that I hope you realize how blessed you are, because not too many dads have had a strong relationship with their grandfather and their father.
Yeah.
That I don't hear that often. Do you ever sit back and say, wow, and I think you've expressed it already, but wow, I've been really blessed to have two lineages of fatherhood impact me. And then also, you seem intentional wanting to carry on that fatherhood legacy. Am I correct?
Yes. And how selfish of me if I weren't willing to pass on that good stuff that has been given to me. How selfish if I was just going to keep it for myself and the life lessons I've gained. Passed from my grandfather and the stuff I've gotten from my dad. And now I want to impart to my kids, but I want to impart it to the world. I love telling other people in the world how proud I am of them, and affirming them and being a dad to them. Because to your point, it's so rare. And if we're going to change that, and we're going to change a culture that makes people passionate about becoming the best dads they can be, then I've got to be willing to recognize when someone's a great dad and then shower them with praise, because that's what's been done for me as well. And that's what I like I said earlier, that's one of the reasons I wrote the book to begin with.
Drew, I'll pass it back. I wanted to make sure that I came out because I'm just really humbled to hear that lineage, and you're continuing that lineage. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Bryce, the idea of both your father's influence, your grandfather's influence, and the differences there, I think really speaks to me, and we share this on the show, is that, father figures or father-like figures can be uncles, can be brothers, can be a coach. I think they're very powerful in the lives of, all children. And I think, that's a big part of the message of our show. But maybe we can just talk briefly about the power of having, multiple, father-like or fatherly influences as adding a lot of value. It seems like that's happened for you.
Yeah. And I think some people might hear my story and think it's always been easy, but one of the things that they're not going to recognize unless they lived in my shoes is, a lot of times it's me choosing to see the good, right? Was my grandfather perfect? Absolutely not. He had his faults. He had his problems. He had a temper, right? I mean, I was on the wrong end of his mentorship sometimes, and my own brothers were. Was my dad a perfect dad? Of course not. And he, like I said, he's the first one to do that. Am I bitter because my dad, wasn't there often during the days and growing up? Of course not. Like I said, I choose to see the things and take the good things from that relationship, and choose to not be resentful for the things that I wish that they would have done differently. And I think that that's a big key, right? I think when we're grateful for those, it does seem to just pour out of us. And you realize that there's a lot of people and there's a lot of good things that we can take from every relationship, but we choose oftentimes to see the worst in people as human beings. And that's where a lot of issues stem from for us. And that's also where a lot of our identity begins to crumble, because we start to think of ourselves as unworthy of the good stuff because we don't recognize the good stuff. And when we start to recognize the good things that have come from our relationships, because it's very rarely where a relationship, whether it was with our father, with our grandfather, with a friend, how many of us have a best man that was in our wedding that we rarely talk to? The best man in my wedding, I haven't talked to in 5 years. That's terrible, right? Is it because that, he upset me at some point no? It's because I'm living my life and doing those things. But I don't think about, he doesn't text me enough or anything like that. I think about the good things that came from that friendship. And so I think what happens if we start thinking about that stuff and we do try to find the good in those relationships, we get the lessons that we start to leverage the things that are able to come out of that. But I also think it makes us geared towards seeing the opportunities to leverage those relationships and appreciate those relationships while we've got them. The relationships that whoever's listening to this right now, they have relationships in their lives that are not going to be there 5 years from now. That close friend that's not going to be here. Maybe they pass on, or maybe they're just not as close anymore. But we don't think about it that way. We just assume that all the relationships in our lives today, as of this podcast, are always going to be there. That's not true. You know, I heard a pastor one time talk about, you know, people are with you for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. You know, and so get the reason, friends, right? The people that are in your life for a reason. Make sure you take advantage of that in terms of like get the lesson you need to know, or the support that they're in your life to give you for that reason. Maybe it's a season, right? Maybe it's a friend, like I said, the best man in my wedding, you know, ended up being a seasonal relationship. I thought that they were a lifetime friendship, right? And that's one of the reasons he was the best man in my wedding. Ended up being just kind of a season friend, and that's okay, right? But the resentment, I could choose to be resentful that they were not a lifetime friend, but I'd choose to reject that resentment and appreciate the season of life I had with them. And then when you realize that you've got those close people, my wife, obviously a lifetime relationship, my kids, those are lifetime relationships. You know, and I've got 2 or 3 very close buddies right now that I would tell you, hey, these 3 guys are lifetime guys for me. And when I do that, I protect them more. And I start to cherish those moments. And I also pour into those lifetime because I want to keep them lifetime because some of those people are up to me to I want to pour into them and text them, hey, buddy, how you doing? How'd this go? And it takes that investment to do. And so I think that for all of us moving forward, I think that's what it is. It's understanding that the relationships are precious, that time is precious for all of us. And then that's where you start to see the good things that comes out of whether it's my grandfather or it's my father. And then cut some people some slack, let go of the pain and the hurt that we had from that friendship or that father figure. Because like I said earlier, it's very rare that anyone would be 100% perfect. And it's impossible. I've only known one person that I believe walked the earth that lived perfectly. Other than that, you know, there's always an opportunity to find the good in every relationship that we encounter.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs, but not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads.
One of the things that you referenced before was this idea of identity. Mm-hmm. And you talk about that in a book, and you know, you share a story about, you know, the imposter syndrome that you had at a certain point in your career, and how but there's a theme that I picked up on as I was reading that really spoke to identity, and you referenced it. And so I'm curious, you had some challenges when it came to your early family life, making this significant life decision to go into Monster Jam or not. How did that impact your identity as a dad through that time?
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to phrase that, Drew, because I think my identity as a father, the good thing is it happened at the same time I was becoming a dad.
Mm-hmm.
So it was part of building me up as a dad, like building that identity from the get-go. And I think that a lot of dads out there are really fatherly to the people that work for them, but they aren't fatherly to their own kids. Maybe they see the opportunities to be that dad figure to people outside the home. And I've always wanted to say, I don't want my kids to have to look outside the home for leadership, for inspiration, for motivation. And a big thing that I was proud of about that, and I still am today, is that my kids get to watch dad chase a dream. And just like I mentioned with my grandfather, watching him go through really hard stuff and come out of it, I allow my kids to see the pain that comes along with chasing a dream, because I want them to know that it doesn't last forever. I want them to watch me come out of it as well. And so my identity, you talk about imposter syndrome. When I had our daughter, when we had our daughter, man, I felt like an imposter. All of us felt that moment when they give us the child in the hospital and like, okay, and they send you off and they put you in the car and you're like, wait, so no one's going to like follow us home and make sure that we can provide for this child, And so you feel like a big imposter there. But I've always held on to this phrase because we always believe it. Like we always kind of have settled on this fake it till you make it idea. And that's a good thing. I think that's a good attitude to have. Fake it till you make it. We become dads and you're like, well, fake being a dad till you become it, and till you make it. And to me, I'm like, man, that's not quite enough. I've realized that instead of fake it till you make it, it's believe it until you become it. And you have to believe that you're a dad until you become a dad. A lot of times, you have to believe that you're worthy of, you have to believe you're an author until you actually write the book, or you have to believe that you're in the top 1% of all podcasts until you become in the top 1% of all podcasts, right? You've got to understand that to believe where you're going and what you're doing leads people to go with you. And so I'll sum it all up with a story with my daughter, because I had a friend that also drove. He drove one of the Gravedigger trucks. Boo, Gravedigger. By the way, all my kids know to cheer for Mohawk Warrior, not Gravedigger. Anyway.
Hey, I remember Gravedigger when I was watching Monster Jam. Big fan.
Do you? Okay. But did you cheer for him, Drew? That's the question.
Gravedigger was cool.
Look, we can end this podcast right now.
Hey, but Bryce, that was way back when.
Okay, good. All right. The statute of limitations.
Tastes change over time. So,
well, I had a buddy of mine who drove one of the Gravedigger trucks. His name is Morgan Kane. And I remember him talking to me. He said the moment he had become a dad about a year or two after I did. And he said, the moment my daughter comes to me and says, Daddy, I don't want you to travel anymore. He said, that'll be my last year traveling in Monster Jam. And he said that a couple times. I never really corrected him because I was like, man, that's great. Good for you. But I disagreed with that. Now, some people might hear what I'm saying and go, well, you're putting career over family. I'm like, no. That's not what it is. My wife, one of the reasons why she was okay with me doing that and taking that 30% pay cut is because I gave up drag racing when I went to go get married. She had never asked me to, but I looked at her and said, look, I got my house in order, and said, look, I'm walking away from this so that we can get our life together. I asked her to marry me. Right. And we started a family. We bought a house. We did all these things after we got married to be able to kind of set us up. So when Monster Jam came knocking, and I had to take this big risk, like I talked about earlier, she was the first one to say, go do it, because she knew that she was the most important thing in my life. And so my kids, a couple of years ago, my daughter came to me and said the same thing that Morgan's daughter said to him. Daddy, I don't like you being a Monster Jam driver. She's probably 5 years old at that point. And she said, because you're gone all the time. And I said, honey, I'm very sorry about that. And I want you to know that nothing is more important than you. Nothing is more important than you. And here's why I'm choosing this career. And this is why I'm traveling. And this is why I'm doing that. But none of that is more important than you are. And she's 5. And all of a sudden, I remember looking at Morgan, and he did walk away from the sport, not just because of that. Like, that was during COVID and all that stuff. But I did talk to Morgan one time. I said, look, that's all good and great, but I also want my kids to know what it looks like to chase a dream. And I want my kids to understand what it looks like to do something hard and to live a life of purpose. And my daughter, about a year ago, I remember asking her, she's 8. And I said, hey, how are you feeling now that you're a couple years older? Like, what do you think if daddy doesn't do Monster Jam anymore? And she kind of looked back at me and she was like, well, what do you mean? You know, I said, well, look, I'm on the back 9. I said different words because she didn't know that phrase, but you know, I'm on the back 9 of my career here. I don't know how much longer I can drive a Monster Jam truck. You know, what if I wasn't Mohawk Warrior? She said, no, I want you driving a Monster Jam truck. No, I want you being Mohawk Warrior. Because I noticed she started getting mad at me if I went to go pick her up from school and I had a hat on. I didn't have my Mohawk all gelled up and I couldn't figure it out. And so that's when I started asking her those questions. And I finally looked at her and I said, why do you want me to be Mohawk Warrior still? And she kind of looked at me and she was like, because people recognize you and I think it's cool. And so I'm going, okay. So the 5-year-old understood that it's hard because daddy travels all the time. She's asking me to give it up. You know, I had this friend that basically gave it up for that same reason. I knew I'd be purpose driven. Now my daughter is watching dad and watching the platform. You know, I go back to the who. She sees who dad is becoming. She's watching me become a better version of myself. She's watching me be someone who uses the platform of motorsports to impact the world. And I look forward to the chance to give all of this up for my kids one day, because they are way more important than a career with that. But she's involved in the dream. And that's the point I'm trying to make. I think when you can involve your kids in the broader strategy of life and what you're wanting to go and do and becoming that best version of yourself as a father, that's where they start to learn and they start to get those lessons that I got from my own grandfather and that I got from my dad growing up. You know, they realize, hey, I am capable, just like my dad, who chased a dream, who accomplished his dream and is still chasing dreams every day. Maybe I can do the same thing. I can do hard stuff and none of it's going to kill me. Like, I can get out there, make it through the challenges that life's going to throw my way. And so when they're 23, 24 years old, man, I look forward to hearing about their wins and their losses, because the losses are just lessons anyway. But that's what I want my kids to ultimately be able to say about their own father, and that identity. They get to be not only part of it, but they're shaping my identity. But they also get to know that, look, all of us make sacrifices as a family. Nothing's more important than my relationship with them. But they also, now when they're involved in the dream with me, that takes a lot of the pressure off of my shoulders and theirs to ask that question. Does dad love Monster Jam more than he loves me? Of course not. And so one day I'll get to give all of it up to prove to them and to kind of drive that exclamation point on at the end of this chapter with them. And I look forward to that moment as well.
Mm. Ed, do you want to hop in, or you want me to?
No, I didn't know you had this passion for Monster. So I'm letting you drive the truck, buddy. I didn't know about
drive the truck. Listen, we need
so Bryce, I didn't know that about Drew. So I'm just going, okay.
Yeah. Okay, Ed. So what about you? What Monster Jam truck do you cheer for then? I know that. Come on.
This is out of my league. I go for you.
Oh, good answer. See, that's the easy
I go
answer.
For you. I'm not crazy that I'm going to say I can go against you. I'm out for you, and I'm speaking that when you come to Toronto next, we all get to meet. I'm very excited. I'm very excited about that. Drew, I know you probably have 1 or 2 more conversation pieces before we have to wrap it up.
Well, I just want to maybe add a comment based on what Bryce was sharing, because I think it's really relevant when I reflect on a couple different guests we've had and also the story that Bryce just shared between him and Morgan. And I think that really speaks to the importance of you as a dad, knowing and understanding your priorities, what you value, working collaboratively with your family to make the decision that's right for you. There isn't a one size fits all answer here, right? So what's right for Bryce and his family and how he's living and becoming, right? What and pursuing his passion, his goals, his purpose, that can be different even in the same context of Morgan's case versus yours. And so I think, as fathers, it's important that we reflect and understand our goals, our passions, the purposes we're doing, and work well with our families to make decisions that are going to serve our best interests. which is not always what the person beside you or the person across the street or, this person that you're following, it may not be right for you. So I think it's just important to be able to, the identity piece of knowing who you are and understanding who you are, I think is tremendously valuable. And so maybe if we stick on this theme, Bryce, what's your perspective on how do you help your children develop strong identity? Because really in this world, there are a lot of influences and maybe a lot of confusion around this piece of identity. Not that we need to go to that part, but how do you help a child develop a strong identity?
Yeah, and that's an understatement, right? I mean, I feel like identity is under attack, and it's this watered down version because somehow what identity you have is going to threaten someone else's. Like that's absolute rubbish. We've got to figure out the way to lead them through that, and I think that's what it is. My 8 and 6 year old, and even my 2-year-old now, they're so preoccupied with what they want to do every day. What do I want to do? What do I want to play with? What do I want to study or not study? What do I not want to go outside and do? It's cold outside. I don't want to go out and play on the playground. They're obsessed with the what. And so they don't know how to phrase the who. And so what's gone on is like we as adults, and I would say, to throw an arbitrary stat out there, 99%, the majority, how's that? The majority of adults that I meet are still stuck in the what as well. They never grew out of it. They never understood that the what becomes a lot easier when you understand the who. When you understand what identity you want to have in this life and who you want to become and imagine that best version of yourself. We can do that with a car, by the way. I call it like a barn find. When you're on the back road and you see that those headlights sticking out of the barn and there's a tarp on it, you pull over, the old man's out there and sure enough, he lets you take a look and you rip open the tarp or rip off the tarp off that car. And sure enough, there it is, a 69 Camaro. And it's covered in dust. It hasn't started in 15 years. It looks like a pile of junk. My wife would look at it and be like, that's a crappy car. I look at it. I don't see the dust on top. I don't see that the motor hasn't been turned over in 15 years. I can see it with that grabber orange, brand new shiny paint job with the speed stripe on it. I can hear the wheels spinning, the burnout, the screeching tires. I can hear that big block motor just tearing apart the rubber on the back tires. I can do that. I can see that car as its best version, not its worst in its current state. But why can't we do that with ourselves when we look in the mirror? And so with my kids, understanding, showing them, I think helping them understand what hard work looks like, being able to praise them when they do things, just like I was talking about before, showing them, hey, are you proud of yourself? Like, I'm proud of you. By the way, are you proud of your effort today? Yeah, Dad, I'm proud of you. That shapes identity probably the most out of anything because of that self-pride and understanding I'm good enough to work hard. So I think hard work is big. And I think secondly, understanding, if you understand you can work hard, you're more willing to believe that you can go and do what is in your heart and chase those passions. And you start to think maybe I might be able to actually be somebody that can pull that off because you're not basing the what you think you can do. You're starting to align with who you want to become. So that's what the ultimate piece is understanding, what does my son Keegan, Keegan, what do it's not just what you want to do when you get older, but helping him see that best version of himself at 25, right? That's what's going to drive him to get through that. And if he wants to become a doctor, it's not that he has a diploma on his wall. It's helping him see that he's someone who would be able to help that patient that just came in with a gunshot wound, be able to put them back together and sew them back up and save their life. That's identity. Someone that who would be able to actually be able to do something remarkable like that, right? That'll start to shape the what. Of course, he'll go to med school in that moment. Of course, he'll want to take on the debt because he's not focused on the what that comes along with becoming the who, right? The what allows to fall in line with that. So my job as a dad is to lead in that way. And the best way to lead is by example. It's not by preaching. It's not by being long-winded like I've been at times here on our podcast conversation. You guys just you're just getting the best out of me here. I don't know. There's something about Ed and Drew together. You guys are a good team, but it's about leading by example on identity. And when they see Dad understanding what the best version of himself is and Dad is chasing after the who, they're going to do the exact same thing. And thankfully I'll be able to help guide them along the way.
I know we're coming up on time, but do you have time for one more conversation piece?
I do. It's your listeners. Yeah, I got all day, man. Let's see. I got to leave in a week from now for Monster Jam. Yeah,
okay. One thing I wanted to ask, in your book, you talk about 3 modes of people. Mm-hmm. The stalled, in gear, and racing. Mm. How do you think that applies to dads as their role as fathers?
I think that we all have had those moments in life where our head hits the pillow at night and we're saying, is this really all there is to life? Is this it? Is this as good as it gets? And there's a danger because I think a lot of people fall into the answer of, well, I guess it is. And they kind of give up and they stall out. And then they've been stalled out for 35 years because they just kind of accepted at one point, like, I guess this is as good as it'll get. Until life kind of jolts them out of that. Maybe they lose a loved one or something, or they hit a midlife crisis and they get moving again. They're like, man, I can't believe I've done this for 30 years. I'm gonna go buy that motorcycle, right? Or something. They have a midlife crisis or something. Or they start to enjoy the moments with each other and they become a better friend because they lost a loved one, or, their wife, or maybe, God forbid, they have a child that passes away, and they start to realize that life is precious and they start moving again, right? They get back into motion, into that mode, just like a vehicle would be. And yeah, they're moving. They're not going fast, and they're definitely not going around a racetrack trying to find a finish line, but they're not stalled out. And they realize that there is more to life and they're trying to find it. Racing mode is momentum. Race mode is where you understand what gears you have to find and when to shift into those gears. And now all of a sudden it's not, your first lap, you're going from first gear to second gear. And now all of a sudden you're going from second to third to fourth to fifth. And now you're high speed and you're going 160 miles around the racetrack, or in my case, in Top Fuel, 300 miles an hour in 4 seconds, or in a Monster Jam truck, shifting from first to second gear so I can jump at 45 feet in the air and blast through whatever obstacle comes my way. That's racing mode. Understanding what gears you have. And so that's why I wrote Geared for Life, is because I share my 7 personal gears, the gears that I shift in and out of, things like becoming built for others, purpose, right? Being purpose driven. I have to sometimes make a purpose-based decision, not a monetary decision. Just like when I left my corporate job for Monster Jam, that was a purpose-based decision. What about failing faster? I realized back in my corporate job that if I've got to get 100, if I got to talk to 100 people to make a sale, let's say, to use a generic idea, that means that 100th conversation is going to turn into a sale statistically on average. Well, what that really means is I got to get through 99 no's. And if I just fail as fast as I can to get through the 99, I'll get to the one yes faster. And so there's times in life today when I've got to fail faster. I do that with moves that I try to create in Monster Jam. If it just means I've got to fail at trying this move in front of 50,000 people in the stands 55 times, right? Then I just got to get through the 54 failures as fast as I can, because I've got to get to that win, that moment. Maybe I pull it off the first time I try a new move, but you're not going to know unless you're willing to fail as fast as you can. So my 7 personal gears that I share in this book, I believe that the reader is going to get to the end of it. They're going to steal a couple of my gears, right? The gears like I just described. But my hope is that they uncover and unlock and realize some of the gears of their own, those foundational beliefs that they've built their lives around, or maybe just that they need to uncover again and they reignite those passions. But that's what race mode looks like, because just like a race car, you use different gears at different times. You got to know when to shift into each one. And it's time to become geared for life and to make that shift into your full potential. And that's what my book is all about.
Drew?
Should we just drop the mic?
Yeah, that's what I was going. I do.
Here's the thing. I think that this might be appropriate because there was a quote that I took from the book that I think I'd like to read here. Just to maybe we'll finish off with this. Bryce, you say, once I became okay with the fact I had lessons I needed to learn and shifts I needed to make to become the best version of myself, I welcomed the obstacles. And that quote stood out to me because not many people would say that last part at all in life. I welcomed the obstacles. I mean, there's a lot in that quote for me, but let's say there's somebody who's listening. They're tired. They're fatigued. They're worn out. They're a dad who feels like you can't do it anymore, or they're facing some significant obstacles. What would you do to maybe encourage them and leave them with something to be able to just keep moving?
That's a great way to phrase it too, Drew. And in my heart, if I were sitting next to my son, I'm gonna fast forward. He's 22, right? He's 22. I'm sitting across the table from him, and he's experiencing the exact same thing that you just described. He's in that, not even just an identity crisis mode, but he's stuck. He's afraid he's going to make something wrong. He's going to make a wrong decision. I would look across the table from Keegan. I'd say, buddy, your job right now is not to have all the answers and not to be perfect. Your job is to just go find that next gear that you never knew you had. Just shift into your next gear. Let's help you find what it looks like. If you're in first gear now, what does second gear look like? That's your only job. And so anyone listening today, that's your job. Your job is not to solve all of your problems. Your job is not to listen to a podcast expecting them to give you a secret to life, because there is not one. Your job is to shift into your next gear and go find that next gear that you never knew you had.
And Drew, make sure you vote for the right Monster Jam driver from now on, by the way.
Yeah. Look, if I come up to Toronto next year, guys, and you guys are in the stands and you guys are fussing about Gravedigger and you're made a sign, I can see Drew being a sign guy. Like he makes the banner, like Gravedigger and Blue Mohawk Warrior. I'm going to come into the stand and I'm going to smack you with a big giant 600-pound tire in the face.
And that would be deserved. For sure.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, look, hey, Drew, don't let Ed shove all the light on you though. Okay. And or the shade on you. Cause it took him forever just to say he was a fan of mine, cause he didn't know which one to choose. So it's fine, Ed. We're going to turn Ed. We're actually going to, if I'm the Mohawk Warrior, Ed's the No Hawk Warrior there. We got to get you a
No Hawk Warrior.
Yeah, we got to get you.
You come to Toronto, we get a picture. Mohawk Warrior, No Hawk Warrior. I love that. I'm all over that. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Good stuff. Well, Bryce, before we did this, I got jacked, and now my heart is full. And I want to say stuff of Drew, myself, and the whole Dad Central show family and all the fathers and dads and families around the world. We want to say thank you for all you have done, that you and your family are going to be doing and will be doing. We also want to put a out to you and your dad and your granddad. That piece has really stuck with me, the legacy piece. Because again, not a lot of dads have been blessed with that opportunity, that privilege. It's a real privilege. So we thank you for taking the time. If people want to find out more about Monster Jam, where can they go?
Well, you go to monsterjam.com if you'd like. I'd tell you to go follow me at Warrior Bryce on Instagram, TikTok. I think my YouTube is just Bryce Kenny, but maybe it is at Warrior Bryce. I need to probably nail that down. But follow along with this and pick up a copy of the book and give it to that 22-year-old kid in college that can't figure out what they want to do, or the 35-year-old that isn't sure what they're doing on career, or maybe the 65-year-old that just retired, right? That they just need to find that next gear. But Geared for Life, it's on Amazon. It's at your local bookstores. It's on Audible. And we want to put this book out as far as we can because the message is resonating with people. It's helping. And I'll be curious to help do that and go be that grandfather figure, that father figure that you, maybe you had it, maybe you always wish that you had it. Go be that fatherly figure for somebody else. Equip yourself to make the difference and go and truly make that impact that you're capable of making.
Excellent. Drew, any final words?
Just want to say a great big thank you, Bryce, for coming on our show, sharing your experiences, and just offering your passion to us and to the audience in this conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome. And I got to apologize because I was long-winded, guys. I want to converse. So when I come to Toronto, we're going to go out to dinner. I'm going to find out all the great things about you guys. And then that way I'm not going to just talk about myself and go on these long rabbit trails of information. So
sounds like a plan.
That's a plan. And last two things we'll just share with you. Make sure that you don't just manage your time, manage your energy. And remember to give yourself grace.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. Drew, bam. Bam.
Ed, how did you not know to say Bryce is your favorite Mustang Jam driver? Right away. There was a delay. That's okay.
Well, look, I
I
was honest. I'm not familiar with the sport like you. You said you did. He wasn't your thing. So you're in more trouble.
No. Listen,
You're in more
clear
trouble.
it up for everyone listening. I was referencing when I was like 9, 10, 11, 12.
No, out of the reference is what you said first.
Gravedigger. There are a whole bunch of those guys that I only remember Bigfoot and Gravedigger. So,
well, I got size 14 feet, so you can call me Bigfoot. All right.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I mean, a fun conversation, a real conversation, but some, I think, inspiration. Like a lot of inspiration I take from what Bryce shared. And I hope that whoever listened, they were able to get some inspiration as well, because there's a tremendous amount of value. And what I really love is Bryce's passion. So I think that came through loud and clear. And I hope that you get a copy of his book, you get inspired, and you go out there and you live your life in all the gears that you have available to you.
So many knowledge bombs, as I said, dropped by Bryce. One of the ones I really like, and I'm glad he said this, that fake it till you make it, and he converted into believe it till you become it. So believe, dads, believe in yourself. Not only it's important for yourself, but your family, because what you believe, your family's going to pick up on it. And that can have impact for generations to come. In our conversation of Bryce, those beliefs, those things from his grandfather, his father, look at how those have made an incredible impact on him, not only in him with his family, but through him to other people. So it's not just in him, but it's through him. But that's generations back. And I really want to encourage dads out there, if your fathers are still alive, and even if you don't have a good relation with them, get those wisdoms, or even find out stories about the grandfathers and all that, because a lot of times we look green like this one, or on the television screen about history. We've got great history, dads, in our own families.
Yeah,
we don't have to look on a TV screen. We don't have to go to a website. We have history in our own families. So before we finish off, as always, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. We want to hear from you. Email us, dadcentral.ca, feedback, guest suggestions, etc. Be ready. We have a whole pile of people coming up. So you better hang out with us, because we got even more people coming up. So also, dadcentral.ca/podcast, where you can watch and see these epic conversations and share them out. Also, like us wherever we are on social media, and also, especially like us on Apple Podcasts. We'd appreciate that. And finally, we have a pile of free resources at the website, dadcentral.ca. So as always, we want to end off with this. Don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Make sure you give yourselves grace, and looking forward to seeing you on the next broadcast. Be well and keep the faith.